So, the Xbox rumor mill has not slowed down these past couple of days, with the latest leak suggesting that apparently a well-regarded Xbox first-party exclusive is going to be making its way to a competitor platform. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this potential leak, and then we'll go into my thoughts afterwards. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it, I would really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new, and consider supporting me either on Patreon or YouTube memberships. Those links are in the description below. And a big shout out to our current Paladin and Sentinel members, including Daniel Davis, Maytaus, Kalina, and Squid of Cheeses. So let's start off talking about the first potential leak, and that comes from Nate the Hate. Nate the Hate runs a podcast, and this person is well known for sharing this kind of insider knowledge and leaking stuff about the industry, including Xbox. And in their latest episode, which is linked in the description below, in addition to all the sources for today's video, he said the following on the episode. Quote, "I want to bring up the idea of Microsoft going quote-unquote third party, but not really going third party. Just Microsoft expanding their multi-plat publishing initiative that we have seen them dabble with in the past, some of it due to contractual obligations, but at this point, them potentially exploring it due to non-contractual obligations, just due to a desire to bring a game to a non-Xbox branded system or even a Windows branded system and beyond PC. So, PlayStation, Switch. What I will share with you is that in the calendar year of 2024, Microsoft will bring one of their more acclaimed first-party releases to a competitor system. They go on to say, quote, the title that I'm referring to was met with high critical acclaim, fans loved it, and it was in the Game of the Year conversation in the year that it released, end quote. So Nate the Hate is being very vague and coy about not only what this potential title is, but also what competitive platform it's coming to, because he mentioned PlayStation and Switch. So what is this title? Could we guess it? Is there some other rumor or leak going around? It so happens that there actually is. There's actually one source which potentially confirms the game itself, and then another source, a third source in total, which kind of confirms that, yeah, Xbox wants to bring more of its first-party exclusives to competitor systems. So, on Resetera, there is a user known as highly-acclaimed, and this is again another leaker with a good track record when it comes to stuff like this. On Resetera, on a thread, he heavily implies that apparently Hi-Fi Rush will be coming to a competitor system, and that system is the Nintendo Switch. So as we all know, Hi-Fi Rush by Tango Gameworks is very much a well-regarded Xbox first-party exclusive, sitting technically under the Bethesda banner, but it is still on the Xbox system as an exclusive on console. Apparently, that is the title that might be coming to the Nintendo Switch. So on a Resetera thread, there was another user which said the following, quote, Hi-Fi Rush available on Switch, I'll bet, end quote. And then in response to that, highly-acclaimed says, quote, and you'll win. So there is every chance, mind you, that highly-acclaimed was just saying that, not necessarily in a way to confirm that he has insider knowledge that, yeah, Hi-Fi Rush is definitely coming to the Switch, but just to say as a bet, yeah, I reckon you'll win as well, to say that Hi-Fi Rush is coming to the Nintendo Switch. So that is one way to take that comment, but I reckon there is a heavy implication here that this person, given their track record as well, definitely has insider knowledge that Hi-Fi Rush is probably coming to the Switch. So read it the way that you want. At the very least, like, I'm leaning towards believing that some sort of Xbox first-party exclusive is going to be coming to a competitive platform. And Hi-Fi Rush on the Switch is a sure bet in my mind if there was any Xbox title, because we've seen Xbox do that with similar titles also to the Switch, and I'll talk about that in a second. But let's cover the third source for today's video, because it wasn't even just these two people. So Jez Corden on Windows Central, and if you don't know Jez Corden, he's a very well-regarded journalist with a huge, like, I think beyond anybody, he has a great track record when it comes to sharing insider knowledge with Xbox and related stuff, especially Xbox because of his connection with Windows Central. So he wrote a great article. I'll link it in the description below. Please read all of it because it's really well informed. But in particular, there were two paragraphs that I want to highlight. He says the following in that article, quote, they say there's no smoke without fire. I will say that it has been suggested to me from very trusted, proven sources that Microsoft has been exploring bringing some of its back catalog to other platforms, although some of the details remain vague and unconfirmed. He goes on to say later, given the track record of highly-acclaimed, Nate, and my own sourcing on this, I think the rumors will probably pan out into reality. But until things are fully confirmed, remember to take this kind of stuff with a grain of salt, end quote. And of course, he's absolutely right. take it with a grain of salt. Treat it as a rumor at this stage. You don't know whether it's going to happen. And you also don't know, even if it is real, whether plans will change or not. Because I could imagine a reality where stuff like this comes out unintentionally through Xbox channels, it gets leaked, fans are upset, and they are upset about this, and I'll talk about why in a second. But because fans are upset, Xbox might look at that backlash and think, we better change tack and change our plans. That could happen. I'm not suggesting that it will, or even that it's happened in the past, but I could imagine there's some sort of chance that Xbox sees the negativity and might actually decide to course correct when it comes to if Hi-Fi Rush is coming to a system when it comes to that game's release. So let's talk about why fans might actually be upset. Now, there's a lot of opinions across the spectrum, but I want to highlight a couple of paragraphs from Cabriel. Cabriel, sorry, I always butcher his name. If you don't know, is a well-known creator when it comes to covering Xbox-related stuff. I'll leave their Twitter in the description below. But on Resetera again, he really does summarize really nicely why some Xbox fans might be upset about this news. And it's not about fanboyism, it's not about console wars, it's about a legitimate concern that a lot of them have with regards to news like this or potential leaks like this. So he says the following on Resetera, quote, "A brand, an investment, an ecosystem is defined by its games, by its library. And the moment you bring experiences to competitors, you'll give up a bit of that identity, potentially piece by piece. You'll actively take away value, reasons to get into the ecosystem in the first place. From here, it snowballs. You take away reasons to get into the ecosystem, your ecosystem potentially shrinks, your ecosystem potentially receives less third-party support, and suddenly you, as an Xbox gamer, are directly affected by these decisions. You'll ignite discussions when first-party game XY is coming to the competition. You'll inevitably hurt the value of your own brand. Such moves directly contradict some of the statement you as a company made in the past. Some of that is already happening today, but it's also more players get to play Hi-Fi Rush. Again, you seem to fail to understand what the concerns even are about. Of course, more players playing more games is awesome. Anyone would agree with this. What even is this kind of argument? It would also be awesome if more players get to play Helldivers, Splatoon, God of War, or Mario. That's an obvious non-statement, applicable to literally every game ever, big or small. But there are good reasons none of these games are on Xbox. The point is, this is a one-way street. You won't see Nintendo or Sony experiences on an Xbox device or service, period. You cannibalize something that is unique to Xbox for more sales. Yes, you get more money short-term, but you lose other values which cannot easily be attached to numbers. So I really empathize a lot with what Cabriel is saying, but I do want to try and cover as many arguments when it comes to this topic as possible, because like with most things in life, this is not black and white. It's in the gray. It's not binary. I think there's a lot of arguments for and against a company like Xbox potentially deciding to taking one of their well-regarded, well-acclaimed first-party releases like Hi-Fi Rush to a competitor platform. So what I do want to start off with saying that obviously this is not the first time an Xbox first-party game has come to a competing platform, right? So people aren't upset because this is a shock and a surprise. There is a slight track record when it comes to this. At least I think we should put aside when it comes to a contractual reason. When it comes to like Deathloop and Ghostwire and other games where contractually Xbox kind of have no choice or they had to break a contract, right? So putting those aside, there are still games which have come to competing platforms which had no reason to other than Xbox just wanted them there. And the big example when it comes to that is Ori and the Blind Forest that came to the Nintendo Switch. And obviously as well, Minecraft is still supported everywhere. I think that's an exception as well because Minecraft was everywhere. It's huge. And then suddenly for Xbox to just pull support on competing platforms, that's a horrible look. So I think that's an exception. But the big example is definitely Ori coming to the Nintendo Switch. They've done it before. So they've opened the floodgates a little bit. They've opened the Pandora's box. Now it might happen again and again and again. And we've seen comments from, Microsoft and Xbox employees that they're not averse to this. In fact, they don't necessarily agree with the concept of keeping all games locked down and exclusive to their console. So, for instance, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said the following a few years ago. He kind of suggested that one of the reasons they keep games exclusive on the Xbox is only because competitors are doing so, only because Nintendo and PlayStation are doing so. And if they weren't doing it, they probably wouldn't be doing it either. That's the one big reason that they are. And I think this relates to the fact that at heart, Microsoft is a software company that by and large haven't really been about creating these kind of walled gardens where only you can play their software on their particular hardware. They're a software company. They, as a whole, like there's obviously examples against this, but as a whole, I believe Microsoft want their software to be used and played by as many people as possible, regardless of the system that you're on. That's why you see Xbox today releasing their stuff everywhere on Xbox, PlayStation, and of course, even Nintendo Switch when it comes to Ori. And then you even have Phil Spencer back in 2023 when he spoke to Famitsu about this topic. Again, sources in the description below. He stated himself that Xbox should also focus on other platforms and they shouldn't necessarily limit themselves arbitrarily just to Xbox players. He said that at the end of the day, they just want to bring good games to as many people as possible. And he's long hated console wars. Phil Spencer has been a long hater of console wars. Though, as I mentioned, especially with what Cabril said, this isn't necessarily about console wars, right? The argument goes deeper than that. So I do also want to say as well that I don't think this means every single Xbox game is going to eventually make its way to a competitive platform. I think it's very clear that Microsoft still likes having exclusive, regardless of the reason, regardless if it's only because competitors do so. It's still clear that they liked having their own exclusives because it is a reason for someone to buy a console. So Jez Corden in that article says, quote, "I know from speaking to sources that Microsoft is still building a large range of Xbox exclusives, announced and unannounced," end quote. And then you even had Matt Booty in 2019, who was then the first-party studio's boss, saying that obviously we're going to have our big franchises like Forza, Halo, and Sea of Thieves, where those games are designed from the outset to really exist on Xbox. I think that will continue, end quote. So I don't believe that Xbox fans should be worried that all these major titles are going to make their way to Nintendo Switch or potentially even PlayStation, thereby giving you no reason to buy an Xbox in the first place. I think that's unfounded and it's probably never going to happen unless PlayStation and unless Nintendo change their ways, and there is no way in hell that that's going to happen. But what I do agree with, Jez suggested this, Cabril suggested this, it is a snowball effect. And I can understand this argument. If they did it with Ori and they're potentially doing it with Hi-Fi Rush, why not other games? Why not Forza? Why not Starfield? Where is the line drawn and when does it end? I think with games like Elder Scrolls 6, that's an obvious, it's a no-brainer. There is no way they would bring that to PlayStation or Nintendo because that is absolutely a console mover. It is a hardware mover. I could imagine thousands of people buying an Xbox just because they want to play Elder Scrolls 6 because they can't play it on their PlayStation or Nintendo. So I think some games are clear, but others are a little bit in the middle, in the gray. Like Hi-Fi Rush is one of those examples where it was well acclaimed. It was considered as, Game of the Year potential last year. But how popular was it really? Is Hi-Fi Rush a console mover for Xbox? Probably not. Those are the kinds of games which you think might actually snowball into going to competitive platforms. And then when you have that happening, when you have this title, then that title, then that title, Xbox players understandably are constantly left asking and wondering whether each new first-party exclusive is actually going to go onto a competing platform one day. You know what I mean? And therefore, they might at one stage ask themselves, is it worthwhile buying an Xbox? Am I better off buying a Nintendo or a PlayStation, which might have some Xbox exclusives, in addition to all the exclusives that Nintendo and PlayStation have on their platforms? Would that be the better purchase for me? Will that be better value for money instead of buying an Xbox that absolutely will never get a PlayStation or a Nintendo exclusive, as Cabril suggested? So I understand the argument that it's a snowball effect. And because of this, what I will say, even though I want to bring some arguments to, and play devil's advocate for a little bit, what I will say is that I agree Xbox needs to be much more clear. They need to be much more clear on this topic and just tell us what games will never, ever, ever, ever come to a completing platform, right? We need to be clear with that. I 100% agree. And then there are the titles which you're like, we'll decide on a case-by-case basis. But here's what I do want to say. Sometimes it makes sense. Whether you hate it as an Xbox player, whether you don't think it serves you as an Xbox consumer, It absolutely makes sense, at least when it's the exception and not the rule. So when you bring select games to other platforms, select IP even to other platforms, they're reaching new audiences. Like there is no denying it. There are literally tens of millions of gamers that don't own an Xbox platform or don't even own a PC. How many gamers are there on Nintendo Switch? How many gamers are there on PlayStation 5? Tens of millions, right? And these are tens of millions of people that will never get the opportunity to play your game if it is solely an Xbox exclusive. So with Sun games, there is an argument to put them onto other platforms so they are played by more people. And I think this is actually a legitimate argument, you potentially could convert those players eventually to an Xbox console if they really enjoyed this game that you've brought to their system, and then one day you do a sequel that is exclusive. They might be like, you know what? I like the first version of that game, the first game that came out. Now I'm going to buy an Xbox because I know what that game is. I wouldn't otherwise have known about it unless they released it on the Switch or the PlayStation. But now that I know what it is and I know that there's a sequel coming, now I will buy an Xbox. I think that's a legitimate argument too. Probably the fringe case, but at the end of the day, you know what I mean. More people playing your game is a good thing, especially with Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush, graphically, gameplay-wise, is a perfect fit for the Switch, just like Ori was. I can understand why Hi-Fi Rush would be a great, perfect fit in the eyes of Microsoft on the Nintendo Switch. They're not mentioning PlayStation here, but the Switch, I think, is a good fit, especially because there's been a leak as well that apparently Hi-Fi Rush is getting DLC. So when you have DLC coming, you get the big game out onto Nintendo Switch, the DLC comes, you sell more DLC. Strategically, business-wise, it does make sense for them. Yes, it's more for short-term gains and short-term monetary gain, but it still makes a lot of sense. And this is the one thing that I want to mention as well, that maybe a lot of people don't necessarily understand or appreciate, and it's that the developer of this game, Hi-Fi Rush, is Tango Gameworks. What everyone needs to understand that Tango Gameworks have their own targets to hit. That's how it works. It's not just Xbox, we need to hit X amount of revenue this year and X amount of Game Pass subscriptions and we'll be fine. Tango Gameworks have their own internal expectations and their own targets to hit and KPIs they have to hit. So when they don't hit them or it's not as good as they could be, they have to look around and think, well, what can we do to sell more games? What can we do to make Hi-Fi Rush more played on Game Pass so it looks better on Game Pass? How can we actually sell more units on PC or other platforms? And because of that, I suspect that Tango Gameworks might actually have asked the higher-ups at Xbox to have their game released on the Switch. Like, hey guys, it did really well on Xbox, but because Xbox only has a set amount of users, and we think it will do really well on the Switch because there's literally tens of millions of gamers on there, can we release it on the Switch, get in more money, and allow us to hit our targets for this year? Because if you think about it, does Tango Gameworks have another game coming out this year? Probably not. So bring out, bloody Hi-Fi Rush onto the Nintendo Switch this year, and suddenly their 2024 budget looks incredible because they've just brought this game onto a platform that's well regarded and has tens of millions of gamers on there. It would sell like hotcakes, I believe, on Nintendo Switch. That absolutely has to be in the discussion here, especially with how expensive game development is getting, especially with how narrow margins are becoming, and especially with how increasingly high these KPIs and thresholds, I assume, are in developer studios like this at Tango within Xbox. We have to consider that reality as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I know that I got a little bit passionate towards the end, but you do have to have some sort of acceptance of a business reality here. It's not just about Xbox at the end of the day. The developer and their goals and their targets, like Tango Gameworks, matters just as much. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.